Hello and welcome everyone to the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance's Crypto Roundup for Friday, February 7th, 2025. Sorry we're late. The usual fun-filled technical issues. Ron Quaranta here with my dear friend and co-host Josh Klayman. David Brill can't join us today. He will be back next week. Before we begin, our usual disclaimers. Thank you all for joining us. Please keep in mind that nothing discussed is any sort of advice, Josh, whatsoever. And certainly not any kind of token recommendations. And then everything Josh and I are discussing really our own personal opinions, not necessarily the opinions of our respective firms. Josh, with disclaimers out of the way, I want to kick off by asking you a question. What is Emirates First Class like when you're globetrotting?
I mean, I will say, I did not fly Emirates First Class. For those in the audience, including who may be at my firm, wondering.
Yes, joking. Sorry.
However, Emirates was amazing, and I got much more rest on the flight back than I usually would.
Josh, it's good to see you. There's so much for us to cover. I want to kick it off with some of the things you and I have been texting about and chatting about. It's been a busy week. The SEC Crypto Task Force, I've been fascinated by how fast some of what they're doing is happening. For those who may not know, SEC Commissioner Peirce is now in charge of the Crypto Task Force. We know Commissioner Peirce, Josh. I know you. We've met. We're not lobbyists, but we've certainly met with her and others at the regulators in the past. Josh, are you surprised at how fast some of what the SEC is doing, how fast that's moving forward?
I mean, I am and I'm not, right? I think Commissioner Peirce has always had an open door. She's always had the backs of the industry. And I think many of the ideas that she has, I'm sure, have been percolating for a long time. And we saw them, in the various dissents that she shared over the years. And some of which were joined by Mark Uyeda, now acting chair of the SEC. Also, I mean, we have to remember, Commissioner Peirce previously put forward not just one, but two potential safe harbors for tokens. So I think this has been pent up, and now there's finally the opportunity really to unleash change. And I mean, I was stunned and excited to see it. And yeah.
It's interesting, Josh. We've talked about this in the past. I got that same sense, and so many did in the industry. She was just waiting. She had her, I want to call it a manifesto. It's probably not the best word, but her description of her perspectives on what's happened in the crypto industry and what should happen going forward. Her many criteria around where crypto could evolve safely in the United States. So it was really fascinating to see how far that's already going. I have to stop and say hello to Emma Channing again because I mentioned Emirates Airlines, and of course, now I'm in trouble, Josh, because I didn't mention where you were. You were globetrotting this week. Why don't you tell everyone what you were doing this week?
So I had two interesting places to go. One, I got to see Emma, and that was in London. I was there for the Digital Assets Forum, and also where I spoke. And then after that, Zappo Bank and another group had a really wonderful event afterwards. And Emma was there, and it was great to catch up in person, as well as obviously with others from the industry. And so that was great. I am a bit jet lagged now because right after that I flew to Dubai, and that was for a multi-day set of client meetings. So it
Josh,
was work but fun. So
for everyone in the audience, every time Josh tells me she's jet lagged, she might not be 100%. She's on our legal working group call and she's like at 110%. So I'm not buying the jet lag excuse anymore, Josh, but it was an amazing trip, I'm sure. What was the tone and tempo in London? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I would say one of the funny things is I've spoken at that particular event before, and at the European Blockchain Convention as well, which is under the same umbrella. And this was the first time in all these years that I didn't go on stage and say something like, be very, 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 very careful with the US. And, the SEC is likely to think that every single, issuance or every single offer or sale of a token would be an offer and sale of a security. I actually said, the US is open for business.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are feeling that way. A lot of people are excited. I think institutions, this was a really institutionally focused event. Um, Institutions are excited, but everyone's excited. I mean, things are happening at such a pace. I mean, also in Dubai, I mean, same things. People have been watching. People from around the world are watching. Of course, they're also watching other markets too. You know, the US isn't, of course, the only market, but finally the US, I mean, and we're a huge market.
Yeah.
You know, and leaders in tech in many, many ways. And now finally, I think people are seeing, wow, like I said, US is open for business.
Yeah. Whatever anyone's political affiliations, Josh, it is really fascinating to see how quickly some of what's being put forward by the administration, whether you agree with it or not, how fast some of that's moving forward. Josh, I want to come back to the SEC. I mean, there are other agencies we talk about, and there are certainly CFTCs in the mix. But one of the interesting things I wanted to ask you about, and we talk about this fairly regularly, there's still a whole bunch of pending cases out there. SEC v. Coinbase, I think, SEC v. Ripple, and then the countersuits, for example. Do you have any perspective that you can speak to about what happens to those cases over time in this kind of new US approach to crypto? They don't just go away, right?
Well, I think it probably depends, right? To the extent that there's an appeal to a court, I mean, I'm probably not the best
Sure.
positioned one to say what exactly happens. As we've talked about on prior sessions, new heads of litigation, new heads of enforcement can make certain decisions
Yeah.
in terms of pursuing a case or what happens to it. But the extent of that is sort of beyond my non-litigator knowledge. What I
Yeah.
would say is, you know, we are seeing strong moves that the SEC is shrinking its cyber and crypto enforcement,
Yeah.
right? And deprioritizing the crypto enforcement. We've seen moves by, you know, the SEC's key litigation person reportedly to an IT office.
Is that
So,
unusual? I don't know the person we're talking about, and it's been reported all over the news. It seemed to be a little bit of a kind of kick out the door into a different group within the SEC, and it just felt harsh. And I'm certainly not going to be one who says, "Hey, SEC under former Chair Gensler, you're great," but it seemed a little harsh. Or did I overread that?
well, I think it's hard to know for sure. I
Yeah,
mean,
fair.
definitely the way it was reported, it sounded harsh, but we don't know what conversations had or what kind of planning might have happened. I mean, similarly, we did see a move um, out of the chief accountant's office by really the person who reportedly was really instrumental in SAB 121.
Right.
That also follows, I believe, like the January 24th or something like that retirement of the SEC's chief accountant.
Yep.
So none of these positions, as far as I know, are typically political appointments.
Right.
And so I think in that sense, maybe, you know, maybe where there's smoke, there's fire, right? In terms of the moves. I guess I just want to be a little cautious because these are people and people's lives and people's
Yeah. Exactly.
professions. But I would say, you know, taken in the aggregate, these moves, along with, you know, the executive order that we saw from Trump, the the speech by Commissioner Peirce,
Yep.
the launch of the website for the crypto task force, you know, these all taken together and statements within there about, if you may have seen, with respect to Hester Peirce's "The Journey Begins"
Yes.
speech.
It's
You know,
well
she
worth reading that speech.
yeah, and it's really far ranging. It also talks about, you know, potential prospective and retroactive relief
Yep.
for those who have supported a token launch, you know, but also things like thinking about litigation strategy and things like that. But really, it's far ranging. It even talks about crypto lending, crypto staking, like everything you could imagine.
And it shows you the
So.
depth of thought she's put into kind of the challenges and issues that need to occur to move the industry forward. I want to pause for a second. The Josh fan club continues to grow. Comment from a LinkedIn user: Josh, you still look amazing. Even with jet lag, have to get your secrets. I don't know what your secrets are. I'm assuming it's a lots of rest and water.
You guys are so kind, but you know what? If you, I actually took photos of my feet and ankles. I could barely get my loafers on when I was getting off the plane, and it looks like have you ever seen things where like people are like 9.5 months pregnant? And no, I'm not, obviously, but like where you see someone's legs and you're like, whoa, that looks crazy. That's kind of what my legs look like from the flight.
You're not going to post those here, are you? I mean, we could share them separately at a WSBA meeting, but probably not on the broadcast.
No.
Uh, Josh, I appreciate it. And for everyone in the audience, again, thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn Live, on X. If you've got questions for Josh or I, please do post them in the comments. Josh, one last thing on, when we talk about the task force, and I want to wrap it up here, that retroactive relief. You said something a bit earlier. We talked about safe harbors. And, full disclosure, Josh, you and I and a bunch of folks are going to be heading to Washington in March to have some conversations, again, not lobbying, but conversations with regulators and from the perspective of voice of industry in this space. Does retroactive relief, can you be grandfathered into a safe harbor, Josh? Does that make sense?
So I would say, I don't know all the regulatory processes that would have to take place, in terms of saying like, okay, we're going back in time and doing this. Nevertheless, I think for a long time we've been thinking about grandfathering as a potential solution, right? Even
Yep.
when you think about the types of requirements that, I mean, obviously the whole sea has changed,
Yeah.
so we're not even having the same arguments about things. But even back in the day, when before the SEC brought enforcement actions or cases against trading platforms, often many of us floated ideas saying, well, why can't we just grandfather the existing tokens and have some kind of
Exactly.
framework for how you launch them going forward? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there are others who are more steeped in the exact steps that would have to take place. But I mean, it seems like there is, broadly speaking, alignment between the executive branch and many in Congress on these issues, and even with the judiciary. I mean, it's not all gone one way or the other, but there certainly are judges, including Judge Fela, who, when
Yep.
Coinbase's she granted leave for Coinbase to appeal um, her decision on the motion to dismiss. She said something like, it's a controlling question of law that's at issue here with respect to the application of Howey and the securities laws to tokens, and that there's substantial grounds for disagreement.
Yeah.
So I think these are, we're seeing movement. And just one final thing about Commissioner Peirce,
Yeah. Go
just
for it.
since you were mentioning, um, you know, I think one thing that's really incredible is she's had a long tenure there for
Yeah.
for with respect to, the growth of the digital assets industry. And not only do I imagine she's had a plan for a while, but she's also been privy to the discussions at the commission about, the arguments and the discussions and that led to some of the decisions that she may have dissented from.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. I'm excited.
She's one of the sharpest minds out there, and that's easy to say coming from the crypto industry, but having read her material over the many years, all of us, it's interesting to see where she's gone. Josh, we lost your picture, and
Oh,
Emma there you go, and Emma Channing is posting links. I haven't opened them, but something about a swimming pool. So, Josh, I have no idea where this is going, but we'll have to take a look at it at a separate time. I wanted to ask one more thing, Josh. It's interesting because we've been talking about this kind of new dawn for crypto in the United States. You mentioned being in London and being able to say, America's open for crypto and all of these great things. And of course, the crypto market's been tanking for the past week or two. I think Bitcoin's down past week almost 7%. Ethereum's down 20%. And I know we talk about prices, and Dave and I often talk about the macro. David, Josh, were you surprised at kind of how the market seems to be reacting? And, from your perch, do you have thoughts about why it's reacting this way?
so to be fair, between trying to keep on top of all the regulatory and legislative announcements this week and trying to get things out on each of them,
Yeah.
I haven't really been watching price.
Yeah.
I do note that I saw, I think that Bitcoin, I think I saw on CoinDesk today that Bitcoin is around 100 or something like that because of jobs data. So I was actually
Yeah.
going to ask you your thoughts on that. So maybe
So
I'll just toss it back at you, Ron. What are your thoughts on what's going on in the market?
yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. David and I and you talk about the macro data. And just for everyone in the audience who might have seen, today was Jobs Day, and it was the first report for January, and they were expecting something like adding 170,000 jobs. They only added 143,000 jobs, so it kind of had this perspective that, well, the economy is slightly slowing at the margins, and maybe there can be another interest rate cut. Because remember, interest rate cuts always lend itself to risk on assets as people chase yield. And of course, I think a half hour, an hour later, consumer sentiment came in, and it was not great. Lowest consumer sentiment number in 7 months, and then both the crypto market and the regular markets generally fell out of the bed. So the challenge is there's a lot of uncertainty in the broad market, Josh. Equities, crypto, everyone's screaming about tariffs. Does that mean inflation comes back? And in my mind, no matter what the market is, no market likes uncertainty. And it might be, yes, America's open for crypto, and that's great, but whatever anyone's political viewpoints, there's a lot of uncertainty coming from these conversations. So it's really interesting to see where some of that goes. There's challenges to it as well. I mean, if you dive into the data, and David and I are policy data geeks, the benchmarks were changed, and those benchmarks change almost every beginning of the year. But it also told us that the economy may not have been quite as good as people thought last year. The estimates are somewhere between 500 and 1 million jobs less than people thought were created. And remember, Josh, we've talked about this. Budgeting and forecasting is built on that data. Capital allocation and strategy is built on that data. So there's a lot of confusing information out there. And we'll have to hang on and see where that goes. One last thing.
May I just interject
Go
something
for
on
it,
that?
please.
I mean, you and David weren't fooled, right? I think
No.
you guys were pretty aware of the interesting developments.
It's always it's not just the data, it's always the revision. And again, nothing I'm offering is investment advice, but when I look at the data, I try to position where I think those revisions might be and how that might change crypto, how that certainly might change equities. But when we talk about sentiment, the one last thing I'll add to that, Josh, is the greed fear index, right? And when we approached the end of the year, everyone was screaming Trump trade, and I was half joking with David that 125 is coming. May not have been for December 31st, but it's coming in January. Never did. But some of that sell-off means that we're bending more towards fear and less towards greed, and that's generally a forward indicator of buying opportunity. The old Warren Buffett saying, or some JP Morgan, I'm probably screwing it up, like when there's blood in the streets, quote unquote, that's when you start to buy. So I think we're looking at potential good opportunities in the next few months. I legit lost that stake bet, and I lost it hard. So I'm going to have to schedule that with David and yourself. But, uncertainty makes it difficult to prognosticate. I'm going to shut up.
Absolutely. Well, that's why those who take a risk and are able to make a good bet do so well, because if everyone could do it, then...
Shout out to our chair of our enterprise working group, Sonia. I keep telling her that I keep joking with her about Shiba. She thinks I have a trillion Shiba or something. I don't, and I do not advise Shiba to anyone. But Josh, another note from Emma Channing: swollen ankles and legs, too much plane time. Get into the pool, Josh. Josh, you've got an in-ground pool at the compound in New Jersey, don't you?
I might have a pool. It might also be frozen over.
Fair point. And we've got a snowstorm coming apparently tomorrow. Josh, there's still so much to cover, and I know we're going to keep it relatively short. I want to go back to one other thing the three of us have spoken about, and I would love the audience perspectives on some of this. And again, we're talking about the SEC, in no way negating CFTC and CFPB stuff that we've been seeing in the news. But there are a couple of new ETFs that are moving forward incredibly rapidly. And when we look at the challenges of the original Bitcoin spot ETFs, and clearly Chair Gensler wasn't fond of doing that. And then we saw Ethereum spot. Are you concerned about some of what these new this crop of new ETFs might be? Polkadot, for example, is one of them. I'm probably forgetting one or two of the others, because we still have concerns about market manipulation and data discovery and all of the things that a regulator is supposed to be looking at. I guess what I'm trying to say is, are we moving too fast, Josh?
So I have to say, I can't speak to the Polkadot one for obvious reasons.
Sure,
given my relationship with them. But I would say, I think we think that things are moving, like when we hear that things are moving rapidly, I
Yeah.
think it's because we become so conditioned to
To not move.
stagnation. I
Yeah.
mean, if a filing is allowed to remain live or go live, or we're waiting for an update,
Yep.
I think I do imagine that the SEC will go through its process. I just think we've become acclimated to a system in which we were kept waiting and waiting and waiting for what, like 10 years?
Yeah. Everything feels
I
fast
mean,
when you were coming from not moving at all, I guess is the
yeah.
perspective.
I mean, I do think some things, as the process goes through and as the requests for rule changes, as those are reviewed, the filings, I think to the extent that concerns exist from the SEC, they will raise them. But at least now I believe that there is a fairer arbiter,
Yeah.
a
Yep.
fairer decision making. And again, I don't know what the timing speed should be. I don't
Mhm.
know if it's going faster than optimal or what. But I would just say that 10 years for approval only after a huge court case, when Grayscale was brave enough to
Yeah.
bring the suit. I mean, yeah,
It
I
just
think
feels good to move forward.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Josh, we've only got a couple of minutes. I wanted to rip up the script a little bit. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I just read, and for anyone in the audience, if you've read it, everyone's talking about Operation Choke Point 2.0 again and kind of the investigations that seem to be going on. And there was particularly one judge, forgive me, I don't remember the judge's name, but if anyone's read the judge's commentary, I don't even remember the case, but it's tied to Coinbase. It's history something versus FDIC and as a FOIA request. And the judge, you mentioned the judiciary earlier, Josh. The judge is really beating up on regulators about this kind of lack of transparency. And do you think we'll see further developments in from the perspective of Operation Choke Point 2.0? Will there be consequences to some of this?
I mean, from what I've heard, at least, like if you look at statements by Senator Lummis,
Yes.
right? Evidently, whistleblowers had contacted her office, and she, has contacted the head of the FDIC, right, to say, where are these documents, and to prevent destruction. And I believe, and I think there had been, at least based on reports that I believe I read and an announcement, that the whistleblowers had also said that there were sort of repercussions for staffers who were speaking
Mm-hmm.
out. My recollection, although I don't have it in front of me, was that Senator Lummis had said something like, she would make sure that this is pursued, and that, to the extent that there is a violation of law, people would be held accountable. So I think people are really, I think many people are shocked that
Yeah.
this happened. Many in our industry are not shocked because we saw it
Well,
happening
so
or we
many people
suspected
didn't.
it happened.
So many people didn't believe it for so long. And when you see some of the folks out there speaking to it, there seems to be, and I don't go for conspiracy theories generally, a very clear pattern of debanking. It'll be interesting to see where this goes, Josh. I'm sorry I cut you off. Please finish that thought.
Oh, I was just going to say, we have to applaud these litigants who have brought
Yeah.
a great cost to themselves, reputationally and financially and time wise, and just attention to actually pursue these things. I think one of the shocking things about what we're hearing now is that actually the government agency could be destroying records about it. Of course, we don't know,
Right.
right, if that's
Fair.
actually happening, but yes, I think it's very important that we have this data, because along with the other information that we're getting, including, like I said, the executive order and just, directions for government to move in favor of supporting crypto. I think now that we have this information out in the open, they say that sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Yep.
Well, the fact that it's actually out there, I think that people are going to go in the other direction. And I think we're already seeing it. We're already seeing it from banks and others, um, looking to support the digital asset space, both for traditional banking services, but also and cash management and stuff like that, but also for
Yep.
investment banking, right?
Yep.
Because we've got a lot of exciting companies out there that could go public or various other things. There are a couple of
If you,
other things. Sorry.
sorry, go for it.
I'd love to just quickly, I know we only have like a couple minutes, but just to plug, we have the new stablecoin bill,
Yes.
right? And that happy it has a federal pathway and potentially a state pathway below a certain, I think, $10 billion threshold or something like that for
Correct.
market cap.
That's it.
So that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I think also you mentioned the CFPB. I think it
Yes.
was fascinating that after the CFPB, the much embattled CFPB, where Elon Musk had posted delete CFPB, I think back in November of 2024,
Yep.
that the CFPB had come out with those proposed rules that would have extended the Electronic Funds Transfer Act protections to crypto and in-game payments for video games,
Yep.
right? And then now we have, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, now being the acting head of the CFPB. I mean, it's almost like a delete CFPB by, you know, in a different
Yep.
sort of way. And I've read that, staffers in many instances were told to stand down on work in certain
Yeah.
areas,
And to,
absent express approval.
and we were responding. We were, it was open for comment until March 31st, and members of the WSBA were working with us to respond to the CFPB's proposed rulemaking on EFTA, and we had to put it down, pencils down, because there's no point in doing it. Shout out to Greg Murphy, buddy. Thanks for joining. Crypto is only one of several industries that were debanked. Cannabis could never get banked either. Absolutely true point. I don't, our focus is generally crypto, but debanking was a phenomenon across a lot of different innovative segments. Josh, as we wrap it up, a couple of things, and hold me to this. When David is back next week, he and I are going to have a very long conversation about on-chain data for crypto. I think I'm seeing a couple of things that are both interesting and exciting, but I want to make sure he's seeing the same data that I'm seeing. And Josh, where will the Gulfstream be flying you to next week?
So I think it would be flying me to my office. but may I just mention one more thing, because I
Yes,
don't want to leave
please.
this out. And I'm going to have to turn my video off for a second so I can look at something, because I had
Okay.
to dial in from my phone.
You have to keep
But
talking
before
though.
I do, I'll just mention, Caroline Pham, who's the acting head of the CFTC, she's been supportive of the digital asset space for quite some time. She has the GMAC and the Digital Asset Subcommittee, and her chief of staff, Harry Young, is serving, as a liaison to the digital asset space as in connection with that. But what I just want to point out a few things that the CFTC has been doing. I mean, they have announced roundtables generally, and now I'm just checking something because I know there was an announcement today. But they've announced roundtables, including digital asset roundtables that will be open to the public. But
Yep.
just today, the CFTC announced the Crypto CEO Forum to launch a digital asset markets pilot. And a digital asset markets pilot is something that acting chairman Pham previously proposed
Mm-hmm.
as a regulatory sandbox to provide regulatory clarity for digital assets markets and ensure that robust guardrails are in place. And the
Yep.
CFTC has had, successful pilot programs before. She is quoted as saying, "I'm excited to announce this groundbreaking initiative for U.S. digital assets markets. The CFTC is committed to responsible innovation. I look forward to engaging with market participants to deliver on the Trump administration's promise of ensuring that America leads the way on economic opportunity." And it's just very exciting. It says participants will include Circle, Coinbase, Crypto.com, and Ripple. I
Mm.
think we're going to learn more. And I just would say, in addition to the digital assets subcommittee, this working group on utility tokens presenting a potential definition of utility token previously, in the last term, I think in November of 2024. Also, the CFTC's Global Markets Advisory Committee, sponsored by Chairman Pham, had released a recommendation last year by the Digital Assets Market Subcommittee about expanding the use of non-cash collateral through distributed ledger technology. So I think we're talking about all these changes at agencies where things potentially were or not potentially, but where things were not so great for crypto.
Yep.
I just think it's important not to forget that an agency that all along has been acting at least with an open mind
Yep.
for crypto, that they're making big strides too. So
Yeah.
I'm
And
gonna
again,
leave that out.
No, Josh, it's a good point. I didn't mean to focus so much on SEC. There's a lot of activity happening, and CFTC is clearly at the vanguard of that. Shout out Greg Murphy. We like cannabis in Canada. I feel like there's a cannabis roundup that Greg should share every week. It'd be interesting to see. I have no idea about that industry or business at all, Josh. Josh, let's leave it there. For everyone who joined, thank you so much for joining us. If you've got additional questions for Josh or myself or our roving correspondent, David Brill, send us a note, info@wsba.co. Josh, next week is also the Miami Yacht Show, so I'm sure that David's 50-meter yacht will be parked there. David, if you're listening, we want photos, and I want to know what you're going to be doing with the next yacht you get. Josh, let's leave it there. For everyone in the audience, again, thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we will chat with you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.